What if one man made more from a single battle than entire nations did from years of war? And what if that man never fired a single shot? While soldiers bled on the battlefield of Battle of Waterloo, a different war was being fought in silence inside financial markets. This was a war of information, timing, and nerve. At the center of it all stood Nathan Mayer Rothschild, a banker with a network faster than governments. A man who understood that the first to know wins everything. If you've ever wondered how fortunes are really made, not by chance, but by precision, this story reveals it. Because this is not just history, it's strategy. We're going to break down exactly how one family built an information empire across Europe, and how they turned chaos into control. You'll see the real events, the real people, and the real decisions that shaped modern finance. No myths only, what can be traced through history. Because the truth is, the outcome of wars isn't decided only by generals like Napoleon Bonaparte. Sometimes it's decided by those who control the flow of information. And when the dust settled after Waterloo, one name rose above the rest. Not a king, not a general, a banker. But this story doesn't begin on the battlefield. It begins decades earlier in a crowded Jewish ghetto in Frankfurt, where a man named Mayer Rothschild laid the foundation for something unprecedented. A financial network that would stretch across an entire continent. What he built wasn't just a business. It was a system designed for speed, secrecy, and absolute trust. So how did a banker predict the outcome of Europe's greatest battle before anyone else? And how did that single moment reshape financial power forever? Long before Waterloo, long before global influence, the Rothschild story began in the narrow streets of Frankfurt, a place where opportunity was limited, but ambition was not. At the center of it all was Mayer Rothschild, a coin dealer with an unusual vision that extended far beyond his small shop. He understood something few others did at the time. Money wasn't just wealth, it was influence, if you knew how to move it. Mayer built relationships with powerful clients, including aristocrats like Wilhelm IX, Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel. Handling their money gave him access to something even more valuable: trust. But Mayer didn't stop at local success. He was thinking in terms no banker had fully executed before: international expansion. Instead of building branches, he built a family network. 5 sons, 5 cities, one unified strategy. Each son was sent to a major European financial center: Frankfurt, London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples. In London, Nathan Mayer Rothschild would become the most aggressive and strategic of them all. A man driven not just by profit, but by precision. In Paris, James Mayer de Rothschild navigated political instability, while in Vienna, Salomon Mayer Rothschild built ties with imperial power. This wasn't just expansion, it was coordination. A system where information could travel faster than governments. Their advantage came from speed, private couriers, coded messages, and relentless efficiency. While governments relied on slow bureaucratic systems, the Rothschilds built their own intelligence network. And in a time of constant war and uncertainty, information wasn't just useful, it was everything. Because knowing what was happening, even a few hours earlier, could mean the difference between profit and ruin, between power and collapse. This system allowed the Rothschilds to move money across borders faster than anyone else, and more importantly, more securely. They could finance armies, governments, and trade routes, all without needing to physically move large amounts of gold. This innovation would quietly reshape how wars were funded, and who truly held power behind them. By the early 1800s, the Rothschilds were no longer just a family business. They were becoming the financial backbone of Europe itself. By the early 1800s, Europe was no longer at peace. it was on the brink of total domination. At the center of it stood one man, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon wasn't just a general, he was a force reshaping the entire continent. Kingdoms fell, alliances collapsed, and borders were rewritten. The conflict we now call the Napoleonic Wars spread across nearly every major European power, and it demanded something few nations could sustain: constant funding. War wasn't just fought with weapons. It was fought with money, vast amounts of it. Armies needed food, weapons, transport, and pay. Without financing, even the strongest army would collapse. This is where Britain took a different path. Instead of relying solely on state funds, it turned to private financiers. And among those financiers, one name stood out: Nathan Mayer Rothschild. Operating from London, he became a key player in funding Britain's war effort. Nathan didn't just move money. He moved it across borders, through war zones, and under extreme risk. Using the family's international network, the Rothschilds transferred funds between allies, supporting Britain and its partners against Napoleon's expansion. One of their most critical roles was financing British subsidies to allied nations, keeping coalitions alive in the face of French dominance. This wasn't just banking, it was strategic influence. Money determined who could stay in the fight. And in this environment, information became just as valuable as gold: knowing where armies moved, and when battles ended. The Rothschild network was perfectly positioned for this, with agents, couriers, and contacts across Europe. They often knew critical developments before governments did, and that gave them a decisive advantage. Because in times of war, delays could cost lives, but in markets, delays could cost fortunes. Nathan Rothschild understood this better than anyone. He wasn't waiting for news, he was chasing it. As the war dragged on, one final confrontation loomed. A battle that would decide the fate of Europe. The Battle of Waterloo. And unknowingly, it would also decide the future of financial power. June 1815. Europe held its breath as two forces prepared for a final confrontation. On one side, Napoleon Bonaparte. On the other, a coalition led by Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington. The Battle of Waterloo would determine whether Napoleon's empire would rise again or collapse forever. Every movement, every delay, carried enormous consequences. But far from the battlefield, another race had already begun. A race not of armies, but of information. In London, Nathan Mayer Rothschild waited, not for the official report, but for something faster. Governments relied on military dispatches that could take days to arrive. But Rothschild had built a private courier network designed to beat them. His agents were positioned across Europe, ready to move the moment the outcome was known. According to historical accounts, one of these couriers witnessed the aftermath of Waterloo and immediately began the journey to deliver the news. Riding through mud, darkness, and danger, the message moved faster than any official channel, carrying information that could shift entire markets. Meanwhile, in London, uncertainty gripped the financial world. No one yet knew who had won. The stakes were enormous. If Napoleon had won, British financial stability could collapse overnight. Government bonds, considered the backbone of national finance, hung in the balance, their value tied directly to the outcome of the war. Then, before the official announcement, Nathan Rothschild received the news. Napoleon had been defeated. The war was effectively over. This moment gave Rothschild something priceless: time before the rest of the market would know. And in financial markets, even a few hours can change everything. This was the advantage he had been building for decades. What he would do next would become one of the most debated moments in financial history. A move that blurred the line between strategy and legend. Because knowing the outcome wasn't enough, The real power came from how you used that knowledge. And Rothschild was about to make his move, one that would ripple through the entire British economy. A move that some would later call genius, and others, manipulation. But at that moment, no one else knew the truth. Only him. And the market was about to react to a signal it didn't fully understand. Because in markets, perception can be more powerful than reality, and Rothschild knew exactly how to shape it. The stage was set for one of the most controversial financial moves ever told. And what happened next would define his legacy forever. With news of Napoleon's defeat in hand, Nathan Mayer Rothschild stepped into the London market, calm, composed, and already ahead of everyone else. What happened next would become one of the most debated stories in financial history. A story repeated, questioned, and re-examined for over 2 centuries. According to the popular account, Rothschild began selling British government bonds, slowly, deliberately, in full view of the market. To the other traders, this looked like a signal. If Rothschild was selling, something must be wrong. Panic began to spread, because in markets, people don't just follow facts, they follow behavior. Prices started to fall, and as they did, fear took control. More investors rushed to sell, each trying to escape before losses grew worse. But behind the scenes, something very different was happening, something almost invisible to the public eye. Rothschild's agents were quietly buying, acquiring bonds at dramatically lower prices. Piece by piece, they accumulated massive positions, while the rest of the market was consumed by fear. Then, the official news arrived. Napoleon had been defeated at the Battle of Waterloo. The market reversed almost instantly. Confidence surged, and bond prices skyrocketed. And those who had bought at the bottom stood to gain enormously. This is the story often told, that Rothschild orchestrated the panic to maximize profit. But history is rarely that simple. Many historians argue there is limited direct evidence of deliberate market manipulation, suggesting the story may have been exaggerated over time. What is well documented, however, is Rothschild's speed. He received reliable information before most of the market. And in financial systems, early knowledge alone can create immense advantage, even without deception. Because markets don't reward truth, they reward timing, and Rothschild mastered it. After Waterloo, the war was over, but a new kind of power was rising, not on battlefields, but in financial centers. The defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte reshaped Europe politically, but it also reshaped who truly held influence behind the scenes. At the center of this shift stood the Rothschild family, now firmly established across the continent. Led by Nathan Mayer Rothschild in London, they became the dominant force in government finance, especially in the market for sovereign debt. Governments needed rebuilding funds after years of war, and the Rothschilds were ready to provide them. They arranged massive loans for nations, financing recovery, infrastructure, and stability. From railways to national treasuries, their influence expanded rapidly, touching nearly every major European economy. Their strength wasn't just wealth, it was coordination across borders. 5 brothers operating in 5 key cities, sharing information faster than any government system. This gave them a unique advantage in managing risk and identifying opportunity before anyone else. They could shift capital across nations almost instantly, responding to crises in real time. As monarchies struggled to regain control, the Rothschilds quietly became indispensable. Their financial support could stabilize governments or leave them exposed. This marked a profound shift in power from traditional rulers to financial institutions. For the first time in modern history, money rivaled monarchy, and influence could be measured in capital. And at the heart of it all was a system built decades earlier on trust and speed. What began in a small Frankfurt shop had grown into a financial empire, spanning the entire continent. And the world would never operate the same way again, because power had found a new form. By the early 19th century, the Rothschild name had become synonymous with financial power. But with that power came something equally enduring: mystery. Stories began to circulate about how Nathan Mayer Rothschild built his fortune, some grounded in fact, others shaped by speculation. The tale of Waterloo became one of the most famous, a story of timing, strategy, and alleged manipulation. But historians continued to debate its accuracy, separating documented events from later embellishments. What remains undeniable is this: Rothschild had faster access to information than most of his competitors, and he knew exactly how to act on it. His advantage wasn't magic. It was infrastructure built over decades by his family. A network that connected cities, governments, and markets, faster than any official system of the time. And that speed changed everything, because information became the most valuable asset in the world. The story of the Rothschilds is not just about wealth. It's about understanding how systems create power, how trust, coordination, and timing can shape entire economies, even in the middle of war, and how influence can move quietly, without ever appearing on the battlefield. Empires rise and fall, but those who control information shape the future.